And we are going to go ahead and get started. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the American Family Insurance DreamBank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. I'm Jenna, and on behalf of DreamBank, we're thrilled to have you with us for today's event. For those who have attended our virtual or in-person events in the past, welcome back. For anyone that is joining us for the first time, I'd like to take a moment to introduce you to DreamBank. Here at American Family Insurance, life's better when you're under our roof because when you feel totally supported and protected, any dream is possible. That's why we created DreamBank, an inspirational community destination and virtual experience designed to help people pursue, achieve, and protect their dreams. Before we kick off today's event, I'd like to highlight an exciting upcoming DreamBank offering. If you are in the Madison, Wisconsin area, join us for our holiday open house tonight from 5 to 7 p.m. This will be a family-friendly event with all the ingredients for a perfect holiday event. We will have hot chocolate, cookies, a holiday house craft for a cause, and a special performance by Grammy-winning artist Grace Weber, who will be doing a fireside holiday set. Plus, for every holiday house made, American Family will donate $10 to Habitat for Humanity up to $5,000. I'll drop the registration link in the chat in just a moment. But now I'm thrilled to introduce you to our speaker, Monica Rivera. Monica is a dynamic speaker, podcaster, and the founder of You Wanna Do What, specializing in personal branding, storytelling, and strategic self-marketing. With decades of corporate marketing experience, Monica empowers experienced professionals, founders, and solopreneurs to build impactful personal brands. Known for her warmth, authenticity, and profound understanding of the human experience, Monica inspires individuals and organizations to achieve their highest potential for success. Please join me in welcoming Monica Rivera. Thank you so much for being here, Monica. The stage is yours.
Thank you so much for having me, everyone who's here today. I'm going to share my screen. And if you wouldn't mind just giving me a quick thumbs up in the chat and let me know when you can see it, that would be great. I'm going to pop over into presenter mode so you're able to see that nice and big. Okay, are we great? Can everyone see that? Fantastic. Okay, so we are going to get started today. I want to ask a question. 144, does anybody know what that connects to? The number 144. I know it can be pretty broad, but as we think about that, I want to set the stage by just thinking about 144 is the number of times that we check our phone each day. Now, I don't know if that surprises anybody else, but that is an alarmingly high statistic for me. And I think about how many times I've checked my day. I'm in the East Coast and it's only 1 o'clock, and I've had to have checked it at least 50 times today. So in a world that is so connected, it's hard for us to think about how are we able to be so connected and so have our phones out of reach at all times of the day, yet still feel like we need topics like this. When we think about emotional resiliency and when we think about loneliness, the statistics are higher than ever before. So we have things like this coming out of Forbes, how workplace loneliness can impact your job and your life. There's other headlines that you'll see talking about loneliness that are hitting employees hard at work. That's another study that was done. And there's time and time again, we continue to have article after article written about the pandemic workers, the healthcare workers, what they feel. And also, as we think specifically about women in the workplace, we find that women feel lonelier than anybody else when it comes to work. So we're so connected, we're in this hyper-connected world, yet at the same time, we are lonelier than ever before. So today we're going to talk about this topic. We're going to address not just what it looks like on the surface level, we're also going to talk about some of the root causes for us to feel the way that we do. So full disclosure, I cannot see the chat, but Gemma is here and she's going to let me know everything that's coming through. So Jenna, thank you so much in advance for letting me know about any questions or comments that come through. I really do want to encourage participation. I want to encourage as many questions as possible as we work through a topic that is really important. You could be anywhere today, but you're choosing to be here with us. So the truth of the matter is that when we think about loneliness and this need for emotional resilience, which I think is just, in truth, indicating that people at our core are really hurting, and we're looking for connection now more than ever before. So you are in the right place today. If you've ever felt like you are going through the workday and you feel like you're alone, even when you're surrounded by colleagues, if you recognize the impact that loneliness might have on your well being at work, I think we've all had the difference between the days where we just want to take a day to stay home or to maybe run some errands versus a chronic feeling of not wanting to go because we don't feel as if we're understood in the place where we work. Also, if you feel like you have struggled to make connections with people on a personal level, or you want to cultivate a more positive and collaborative environment. And lastly, maybe you're just striving for deeper and more social connections than what you currently have. Again, we have these devices that are right at our fingertips, and it feels as if we should have more substantive relationships, that we should end the night feeling as if our tank has been filled. But oftentimes, what's happening is we're waking up and we're feeling more alone than ever before. So if you feel any of these things right now, put a one in the chat. You don't have to identify with all of them, but even if you feel one of them, I'd love to know where we are today. So by the end of today's session, I am going to help take you through a framework which is built for connection. It's something that can be used not only at work, but also in your personal life. So since we've not met before, my name is Monica, and Jenna gave me that beautiful introduction, and I want to tell you just a little bit more about myself. So aside from all of the things that you could find on the resume and a bio, one of the things that I'm most proud of is that I'm a first generation Latin woman from the Bronx, New York. Don't know if anybody's ever visited the Bronx, home of the Yankees and the Bronx Zoo. And I'm also my niece's favorite DD. But you'll see here there's a code. So if you want to connect with me or you have any questions about this topic, I encourage you to scan this code so you and I can connect. And if you have things that you want to talk about, you want to deepen the conversation, I encourage you to do that. Now, in 2019, I gave a talk called The Flip Side of Loneliness. And this talk was entirely about what we're going to discuss here today. And so I'll share a very vulnerable slide. This is me, 16 years old, in the Bronx. And that is when I became an unintentional loneliness expert. And so this picture, so overlook the bangs, if you will, but the girl in this photo right now had a smile that wasn't as bright as it used to be. I look at her and I see that the qualities and the light in her eyes just aren't there. And it's because at 16 years old, within 6 months, I lost my grandmother and then I lost my mom. And I wish that I could say that that was it, that these two tremendous losses were the only losses that I felt. And up until that point, I'd never experienced or had any encounter with people who had passed away, let alone someone who was in my family. I had been really lucky up until that point. But then here it comes, my grandmother passes away. 6 months later, my mom passes away. And then for the next 7 years, one by one, I lost everyone in my nuclear family. I'm an only child. So when I say I have a niece, she's not my biological niece, but she is of my chosen family, which I'm very fortunate to have these days. But it was at this age, very young. And if you can imagine what you were doing at 16 years old, maybe thinking about SATs, where you might go to college, who you were going to ask to the prom, or if you were going to be asked to be someone's date for the prom. I was really thinking about these heavy topics of what's going to happen to me? What is life going to look like for me? And there was so much doubt and uncertainty, and I didn't have the words or articulation to communicate how I was feeling. And more than that, I didn't really have anyone to talk to. Because the adults in my life had fallen ill and passed away, and eventually that just happened until I was about 23 years old, I spent a lot of my life really trying to navigate what it was going to look like for myself, a lot of experimentation, to be quite honest. Am I doing it the right way? Whatever that means, because there is no right way to do life. But also, as I was growing up, I just kept thinking, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to be able to connect with people. Now, a funny thing, if you've ever experienced any loss in your life, it feels, particularly when you do lose your parents or your primary caregivers, how somehow you've been initiated into this club that you did not ask for entry into. And that's how I was. I had all of these friends that couldn't relate to these things. And moreover, they really didn't know how to connect with me. They had never dealt with weighty topics. I didn't know what to say. And so I retreated into myself, trying to figure out what life was going to look like. And so when I talk about these topics, as I did in 2019, the first time I ever talked about losing my family, it was this formula that I had created for myself to help combat and have the flip side of loneliness. So the journey that we're going to talk about today is something that I personally identify with. It's something that I've walked with for much of my life, and at this point, more than half of my life. And it's something that I'm also so passionate about helping other people get through the other side of their journeys. Whether it's a temporary bout of loneliness, whether it's needing to tap into that resiliency that you need right now to maybe get through the holidays or get through the next season, or it's something that's more prolonged and something that you might have been battling for a while. I hope that today you find something in my conversation with you that you can take away. So do I have your agreement? If you can put a 1 in the chat and just let me know that you're on board with me, then we can take this ride together. So let's think about definitions. So I want to just simplify it. Let's clear the deck and be really simple as we think about how we're defining loneliness. And we'll think about this in the spectrum of emotional resiliency. So loneliness is the feeling of being alone or isolated. And I want to spend some time concentrating on what that means, the feeling of being alone. So I like to say that loneliness feels more like an inside job. But the other side of loneliness, which is very similar and something that I think a lot of people face, particularly in this digital age, is social isolation. And this is the lack of social contact or support. So if I think loneliness is an inside job, then I think social isolation is more of an outside job. And these are the external forces. And so the framework that I'm about to teach you is really going to focus on these 2 points. How can we think about what's happening internally within ourselves, but also how is those outside influences that are shaping our realities? What do those look like? And how can we help improve those areas? So a very simple way of thinking about it. So if you want to take a screenshot or just think about this for yourself, isolation is being by yourself and loneliness is not liking it. I remember as a kid, because I'm an only child, I spent a lot of time on my own, but honestly, I really loved it. When I heard kids say, "Oh, I wish I had a brother or sister," I never really felt that way. I grew up in a building where there was lots of kids and all of the neighbors knew each other, and we had these great Halloween parties and holiday parties that we spent with each other. And my best friend was just 2 floors down from where I lived. So I had this connection. But I realize now that in today's environment, how I grew up is very different than how kids are growing up, and what workplace looks like. And in this digitally connected society, while we're all around each other and someone on the other side of the world is truly just a click away, those intimate conversations that we're having are less frequent and less frequent, which is why I say that isolation is being by yourself, but loneliness is not liking it. So we need to spend a little bit time really focusing on what it means with technology, because the role of technology in this emotional resiliency that we have been tapped to build for ourselves, it cannot be ignored. So we have things, if we want to order food, we no longer go out to get it. It is a tap away, whether it's DoorDash or Grubhub or Instacart. We have ways that we pay, which we can simply tap on our phone when we do go to a store so that there's not contact with the cashier or maybe a worker at that location. And we can simply bypass the entire human connection. And let's just spend a second to really think about that. We bypass human connection because we have replaced it with convenience. Now, I understand it's a busy world. We all have jobs, we have responsibilities, we have children that we're taking care of. All of these things are happening simultaneously, and it can feel very overwhelming. But as we think about it, at the end of the day, and there was an amazing book called Tribalism, I believe, by Sebastian Junger, if anybody wants to check it out. And it talks about, as human beings, we are wired for social connection. So if we are wired for social connection, and he studied it from an anthropological lens, looking at it from generation through generation for hundreds of years, then even though this hyper-connected world exists, and technology is increasing and coming up with new advancements in every minute of the day, it sometimes feels like. We still have to remember that at our core, as humans, we still thrive on having that connection with each other. Now, I recognize that things are different and there's all different reasons why you've decided to be here today. But when we think about that need for human connection, on one hand, it really has to start with us. And why is that? Because loneliness is an inside job, which means that it requires us to tap into the things that we want to be able to start the conversation, which we'll talk about in a bit, and lead the conversation so that we can create the result that we want, which is to feel more connected. There's a wonderful book called The Body Keeps the Score. So again, can you put a Y in the chat if you have ever read or heard of the book, The Body Keeps the Score? So I'm going to share some statistics with you, and none of it is intended to fearmonger or any of those things. But this is a word cloud. And this word cloud is really talking about some of the things that happen when we have this disconnection from each other. When there's more of this loneliness and social isolation, these are the things that have been noticed. One, there's a rise in anxiety more than ever before. When we're thinking about our performance at work, our performance decreases. We'll see more absenteeism because think about it, if you're not feeling well, if you feel as if you're tapped and exhausted, and so often, especially at this time of the year, we'll hear of the phrase burnout. If we're feeling that way, we just don't have anything more to give. And that's when workplaces will start to see a rise in absenteeism. There's also things that you might not realize, things like a higher risk for stroke, for depression, for even respiratory illnesses. So there's so many different things that are rolled up into this idea of having loneliness and social isolation play such a big role in our lives. The Surgeon General has said that loneliness is as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Now, I've never smoked before, but I have spent a tremendous time of my life feeling lonely. And I have worked really hard to get to a place to try to combat that and get to the other side. But when you see statistics like this, and I encourage everyone, if you're interested, to please read the book because it is a wonderful book and it will share so much more about aches and pains and things that might happen that you think are one-offs. But as you see that they're more chronic and persistent, you can trace them back oftentimes to things that might be happening in your external world that are affecting our internal world. So when we see things like this, again, it's not to paint a picture of gloom and doom. It is not to scare anybody who's on this chat today, but it's simply to remind us that as we think about our agency and what is available to us, things that we're able to do and move forward, and how we are in charge of creating connection, not just within us, but also for us, the collective us. Let's listen to our bodies for some of those cues that it's telling us so that we can move forward. Now, I love this photo. I don't know who's ever been on FaceTime with someone before. And if you've been on FaceTime with someone, this usually happens. So this is a real FaceTime photo with my niece. And this is when she was a little younger. And every time she talked to me, the phone was right here. And so all you could see was her cute little forehead, little bits of hair, and those long eyelashes that she has with each other. Has anybody ever experienced this before? Put a 1 in the chat if you've experienced anything like this. And let's see if I can see the chat at all. So this is something that I see all the time, and it is the cutest thing. And I think when we're thinking about loneliness and we're thinking about social isolation, it can often feel like this, as if the phone is right there in front of our faces. But truly what happens is if we're able to zoom out, we can see her cute little face right here. And we have just more of a perspective so that we can share and see what's available to us. And so that's what I want to do today. Because believe it or not, there is a cause and effect that happens when loneliness is seen and isolation is seen, but it's ignored. And this ignoring, it happens for a multitude of reasons. But when we see something and we ignore it, it creates a ripple effect. And the ripple effect goes well beyond us. It goes to our neighbor and their neighbor. And as you think about work, this is where we create cultures that don't feel connected, where we have siloed cultures, where people don't want to show up, where we have more disconnected spaces. It's because we are seeing something, but we are ignoring that it exists. So just for you, I showed this picture, which is me looking very terrible in the corner of that. And I tried to crop myself out, but her face was totally worth it to be able to see that. So if you're with me, we are going to zoom out just a little bit today so that we can think about how to think about this in a different way. So at our core, and I mentioned before, we are all human beings that are looking to have these very basic desires in life. And I call them the four human desires. So this is something actually that a mentor of mine talks about quite frequently about the human desires. So can anyone put a one in the chat if you have ever heard about the human desires before? So we're going to start with the first one. The first human desire is aliveness. It is this feeling of passion and spiritual energy and purpose all rolled into one. It is waking up every day and feeling that there is this aliveness inside of you. I hearken it to in November, there is a New York City Marathon. And if you've ever been to New York City around the time of the marathon, so I would say a month leading up to the marathon, and especially the very first few days of November, the city is electric. People are so excited about the marathon that it is so easy to get caught up in this. Now, to be fair, I am someone who is not a runner, although I will tell you a story about that a little bit later. But I have many friends who've run in the marathon before, and they just have this renewed sense of vigor when they are getting this medal and they are crossing the finish line, and particularly when they are practicing for the next event. So you'll see this aliveness coursing through their body. And it's the same thing that makes someone want to run a marathon or bungee jump or be very much a daredevil. It is this feeling of aliveness. And so often, and the studies have shown, particularly as we age, we don't tend to tap into that aliveness anymore. We start to feel very much so that it's a rinse and repeat kind of mentality. And it's okay because we have structures and we have things that we have to do, and there's soccer practice and swimming lessons, and this very regimented way that we're asked to live. But deep inside, at our core level, one of our human desires that all of us share, and the beauty about this pyramid that we're looking at, is that this transcends race, gender, ethnicity, age, location. It really comes down to just who you are on the inside. So that first thing is aliveness. So I can't see you here today, but I would love for you to ask yourself after this, what are three things that you can do to feel more alive? If you had to end this chat at the end of the hour and you thought, what is something I can do this very weekend to feel more alive, what would it be? Now, if you can put it in the chat, I'm happy to read it afterwards. I would love to know what are some of the things that are coming up for you. But when I think about that sense of aliveness, it was a few years ago. I don't know if anybody's heard of Spartan races or Tough Mudders. They're these obstacle course races that are usually anywhere between 5 miles to about 12 miles long. And so a few years ago, I was in this place where I felt a little stuck, to be quite honest, a little stagnant. I wanted to shake it up. And I decided I was going to sign up for a Spartan race. Now, I had done Tough Mudders years ago and decided to join for the Spartan race and didn't want to do it in a team. One thing I learned from participating in races prior to that is that I am slow. And part of being slow and working with the team is that you hold everybody else up. So I signed up for these Spartan races and I spent the entire summer training for this race. I went to Home Depot, I made my own sandbags, and I really went all in on this race. And I'll tell you this, at the end, I was exhausted. By the end, I truly thought I might have torn my Achilles, but I had it wrapped at the time and taped up. So I wasn't quite sure what was going to happen when I untaped myself. And it was just tremendous accomplishment. And at the end, I was exhausted. I was dirty. I was achy, but I felt so alive. And there was something about it that truly reminded me, one, that there's so much more inside of me that lays untapped unless I choose to tap into it. And secondly, these things are really fun. And I can do things that are more like this to feel alive. Now, since then, my knees have told me that I am retired. I no longer participate in Spartan races or Tough Mudders or any of those events, but I still seek ways to make sure that I am feeling alive. So for you, again, if you want to put it in the chat, if not, maybe this is something you want to journal on or think about for yourself later. But what are 3 ways you can focus on feeling more alive, whether it's right after this call, to end this year, or in 2025? Now, the next piece of the pyramid are meaningful pursuits. And meaningful pursuits is typically, when we think about this, think of Simon Sinek's why. What's your why? We all want to feel as if we are in pursuit of doing something that is bigger than ourselves. So think about the work that we do. Oftentimes, we can feel disconnected in our work if we don't know how it is affecting the larger business, how our work specifically is making an impact on other people. And so when we look at studies, most commonly, employees will start to feel dissatisfied if they feel like their work isn't meaningful, if it doesn't connect to something that is bigger and in service of other people. So when that's happening at work, it's easy to say, well, find another job. I would never say that. This is a tough market, and it's not something that everyone has the luxury of doing. But what are some other ways you can think about the meaningful pursuits in your life? And so this can be something as simple as making sure that you're recognizing the accomplishments of other people. Because even if you're working in an environment where you don't feel that there's a connection to a bigger cause or a bigger meaning, you can recognize that someone is working hard. And even that gesture, that kind word, can help people find meaning in what it is that they do. When we are connected and we get off our devices and it's in between the margins of the 144 times a day, we can walk over to the supermarket and have a conversation with the cashier and say, it always brightens my day when I see you. That feels not just a compliment to the other person, but as they think about coming to work, it will play in their mind that at least one person is happy to see me, and that feels meaningful in people's lives. It's small gestures that make the biggest changes. So anything that I share with you today are going to be these tiny takeaways that you can apply, because we're not trying to boil the ocean. I believe that we boil the ocean one tiny drop at a time, not all in one big sweep. So as you think about yourself, what are some of the meaningful pursuits that you have? So very quickly, about 7 years ago, I decided I was going to break away and do something different than my corporate role, which was to start my own business. And I didn't know anything about starting my own business, but initially it started with a podcast. Coincidentally, didn't know anything else about starting a podcast other than I had been a listener, but listening versus actually doing were 2 very different creatures, as I learned quickly. And that idea of teaching myself something new, when I didn't know what was going to come of it, I didn't know if anybody was going to listen. I didn't know if I could even figure out how to get it onto an Apple Podcast or a Spotify or any of those things. But I'll tell you what, every week when I decided I was going to show up, because that was the only goal when I started, every week I learned something new, and I built the muscle inside myself to do something that was different, a little courageous, and it had meaning for me. And then I'd met other people. True story, I'd gone to an event in DC. And to be fair, it was a podcasting event. And I was sitting at the front of the room, listening to a speaker. And I raised my hand and I asked a question. And when I asked the question, I heard someone behind me say, "Is that Monica Rivera?" And I turned around because I didn't know anybody in DC. And it was a woman that had listened to my podcast, and she recognized my voice. In that moment, all of the fumbling and bubbling, trying to figure out how to start a podcast and the mechanics and technical components and all of those things felt instantly worth it on a deeper level, because I knew that there was someone else who was listening on the other end of that experience, and someone that had been impacted. And that was a meaningful pursuit for me. And now here I am 7 years later. Now, the third thing is deep connection. So when we're thinking about emotional resiliency, it's easy for us to say, like, yeah, all of these things sound great. I'm actually here in this session because I really want to have deeper connection. And I get that. And for sure, this is something that all of us on a human desire want, the deeper connection. But I will ask you the question, and it's going to be a little bit challenging. So remember, I'm from New York, so brace yourself for impact. But what are you doing right now to create that deeper connection for yourself? What are you doing either at home or in your workplace to create that deeper connection? Are you taking the available opportunities and trying to create those deeper connections for yourself? Because I know that dissatisfaction in life oftentimes is a result of the quality of our relationships. If we are in a relationship with our spouse or our partner and that isn't thriving at the moment, that will have an impact on the work that we do. Conversely, if we go to work every day and we don't like our coworker, and Bob and Margaret are driving us crazy, and every time we're there in the office, we just think like, oh my gosh, I wish I could put on my headphones and tune out. Well, that also will affect how you show up at home. So what are the deeper connections that you're looking to pursue for yourself right now? Sorry, I needed that quick sip of water. And this can be starting organizations within your office. And there's other tactics that we're going to talk about. At my last corporate role, there was a woman, and I know that she always used to have this really huge jar of candy. When I say huge, it was as big as what I'm gesturing now. And it was filled with candy, and she kept it on this little cabinet that was right beside her desk. And every single time someone went by for an afternoon crash to take a bit of candy, they would stop and have a conversation with this woman. Now, why did she do that? Did she just want to feed the office with candy and keep the sweets going and the energy levels high? That wasn't the reason. She knew that by having this jar of candy there, it was going to create connection. And everything I know about this woman, she deeply craves connection, as we all do, but some people a bit more. And that was her way of making sure that if she had this jar of candy, when people stopped by, they were going to say hello. And every single time that there was a conversation to be had and a connection to be made. And then lastly, the fourth thing is to think about growth. When we think about growth, all of us want to feel as if we're moving forward towards something else. But there's something beyond just what we're doing. We have more opportunities for development, and maybe we just have opportunities full stop. So when we think about this fourth piece of the pyramid, which is really at the center of everything, growth is extremely important for us to feel as if there's forward progress. There's this word that I absolutely love, and for a long time I thought of naming my company this, but unfortunately the name was taken. It's called Kaizen, and it's a word that means the continuous progress. And I love the idea of us all being works in progress, but continuing to strive for more. You and I have never met, but I believe that you're here today because you are looking to have that growth, because you're looking for deeper connection or meaningful pursuits, or maybe that feeling of aliveness. So now that you've heard a little bit about all of them, I want you to just put in the chat, which of these do you feel is missing right now? And then let's do something else. Which is missing right now? And then also add, which do you feel is an area that is really thriving? Now, Jenna, I don't know if we have any comments, but if there are any comments, I'd love to hear them if you wouldn't mind coming off mute.
Yeah, we have someone said, love that we are all works in progress, aliveness, missing aliveness, meaningful pursuits, and missing meaningful pursuits. The great things.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate that. And you have this moment and this feeling that you're in the space that we're in right now. I want you to take this snapshot of the four human desires. And if you said it was meaningful pursuits or aliveness, deep connection or growth, I really want you to spend some time, and I invite you to do this. Spend some time reflecting, whether it's the drive you have home today, whether it's 5 minutes of quiet time you can get at the end of your day, or maybe at the top of your day tomorrow morning, to really think, if I had insert your human desire, what would that look like? And then don't judge the answers. Just allow yourself to feel whatever bubbles up to the surface. Because when we ask our brains a question, our brain actually wants to give us an answer. But what happens is we get so caught up in life. We get so caught up in picking up our phone for that 144th time of the day that we don't stop to wait for that answer. So I invite everyone to do this. Just insert your human desire. What would that look like? And then see what answers come up. And for the answers that come up, then make a decision about what you're going to do to help get you a little bit closer. And if you're in luck, I'm going to teach you a little bit more about how you can get there. So once you have that answer, how can we implement that into an action? So if you ever listen to my TED Talk, or maybe you will listen to my TED Talk if you scan that code and hear a little bit more about my story and the flip side of loneliness, I share here my formula, which is exploration, curiosity, and becoming my own best friend. When I was in this journey, particularly in my 20s of self-discovery and kind of thinking, what is my place in this world? What is my future going to look like? All of those things. I really tapped into each of those three things in a profound way. I explored the things that I'd always wanted to try. You know, we always have this list and it can be these really random things. So for example, I wanted to try painting and see what that was like. Turns out I'm a terrible painter. I can show you a photo or a picture that my niece has put together and I have put together, and I would bet most people could not tell the difference. And I'm okay with that. That is not my ministry. That is not where I'm okay. I also even tried, and I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, I tried tap dancing. And as a little ball change, and I was shuffling through the floor, and I was about 4 classes in and realized I don't think I want to tap dance. But again, it was this idea of what would it look like for me to just explore and try these things. And there's great places like Living Social and Groupon and Meetup and all these places where you can try these things that are very low cost and see what you like and see what sticks. And it doesn't have to be anything recreational as I was years ago trying and testing out all of these things, but there's something really fun and exciting about exploring. It can be as simple as the restaurant you pass every day when you're walking home from work or you're driving. Like, oh, there's that little Thai spot. I've always wanted to try it. Well, one day, try the Thai spot. And if that even feels like too big of a task at the moment and too heavy of a lift, I completely understand. Try this. Take a different route home to or from work. Preferably, probably from work, because to work, you don't want to get tied up in traffic or be late. But as you're leaving work, try a different route home. Allow yourself to see something new, whether it's a new neighborhood, it's a new restaurant, it's a new bookstore that you'd want to visit, but tap into that exploration. The second piece is curiosity. What are you curious about? And the best way to do this is to ask yourself, what was I curious about when I was a child? Now, I've talked to over thousands and thousands of people throughout my talks over the years. I've worked one-on-one with clients. And what I find is at our core, we're not that different from who we were as a child. And oftentimes, not just our personality traits, but often our interests can connect back to things we really enjoyed as a child. So be curious about who your younger self was and what are some of the things that you enjoyed. And once you have those two pieces together, then you can start really focusing on the last, which is becoming your own best friend. And I know this sounds trite, but when I say this, it allows you to think about, how am I going to achieve aliveness, meaningful pursuits, deep connections, and growth, doing the things that I want to do? Not necessarily conforming or agreeing to go to activities and things that don't fill your cup, but now you'll feel more expansive, motivated, and activated to find other people that are interested in the very same things that you are. And bonus points if you can find this in real life belly-to-belly connection. So when we think about creating community and connection specifically at work, and again, I like to say it's at work, but truly I believe that we can take this framework with us anywhere. I'm going to share with you this 3-part framework that I have used time and times again. So whenever we want change to happen, whenever we want to achieve a goal, what do we have to do? We have to aim for it. And this is why the 3-part change framework is called AIM. And so we're going to walk through this right now. I'm just looking at time. We have plenty of time. Okay. So the first part is we want to ask, how often do we think gosh, that person looks down. And I'll share a quick story. So, I am a woman of faith, and I have a group of women that I meet with every Tuesday. And I noticed that one of the women, and this is over Zoom, she normally is very chatty and has this great spirit, and she was still chatty. But I noticed that there was just something different about her. There was a slight change that had happened. It was either in her eyes, and she just felt a little bit like something was off. And so I messaged her privately through Zoom, asking her, "Hey, is everything okay? You just look a little bit different." And she said, "I really appreciate you asking. I haven't quite felt like myself lately." And just asking the question, and I promise you this is a true story. 3 weeks later, again, we're meeting for our class on that Tuesday night. And she privately messages me and says, "I really thought about it when you called it out that I didn't look like myself. And I started to look inside as to what was going on. And I realized I'm an empty nester now, and my boys don't really need me the same way that they used to. And yes, my husband is here and he's great, but I'm feeling a little disconnected. And I need to find some things to feel more like myself again. I need to tap back into my own interests." So I booked myself a massage, and that had been great. And I've gotten back into yoga, and I even asked if I could teach some classes. So on Sunday afternoons, I'm going to do that. And it was simply the question of, "Is everything okay? You look a little bit off." That helped ignite that spark for her of like, oh, it's not just me. It's not just something that I feel, other people can see it. And so I invite you to think about the people that are in your life right now. When you see that there might be something, and it's so different now where we're almost taught, oh, if they want to talk about it, they'll tell me, or I don't want to impose, or maybe I'm just reading something that's not there. I don't want to be an imposition. I don't want to potentially offend anybody. But if we just ask, hey, but how are you doing really? That question can be so profound. It's so small, but it's so mighty. So I encourage you, whether you're in your next client call or you're talking with a friend and you just notice that maybe the answers aren't quite the same, just ask the question. You can also ask this of your kids. I am notorious for picking my niece up from school, and of course, ask the question of how school was. And sometimes I get the answer, "I don't know," or "I don't remember," which is always shocking because I've literally picked her up 45 seconds ago. So I don't know what happens in the walk from the door to the car that she forgets. But then I'll ask different types of questions. And I'll say, "Who made you laugh today? Did you help anybody today? Tell me one funny thing that your teacher did." And so that will start to help create conversation. And I go back to that formula of exploration, curiosity, becoming your own best friend. I get very curious about other people. And so, particularly if you're in this session today because you think, well, I just wish somebody would ask about me. I want to be able to share because I don't feel so great right now. Then the funny thing that happens is when you start asking other people, it is the invitation for them to start asking you in return. And when they ask you in return, this is up to you. This is where you get to do this inside job of being able to say, you know what, I'm not quite feeling like myself. And here's how. And when people ask, how can I help you? Give them the answer. They're genuinely asking because they want to be able to help. And it could be something as small like, you know what, I really wish if, maybe you could just text me a couple times a week. Or do you think we could set up a date where we meet for coffee once a month? But even those small gestures, when someone asks how they can support you, do you feel comfortable enough to be able to say yes? And do you have an answer ready? So this is a way we can, again, think about that reciprocal relationship of asking someone else. And when someone asks you, be sure to ask them back in return. So Jenna, I just want to check in. Are there any questions or comments about this one specifically?
I haven't seen any specific questions come through on this one.
Okay, fantastic.
Mhm.
Now, if we have any managers or anybody on the call, I just want to share this as you're thinking about your workplace. Being visible is also something that's really great. And also, when you have those one on ones or you have those team meetings, another opportunity is to ask and maybe spend the last 10 or 15 minutes of a meeting asking questions in a different way so that you can actually get a pulse check about what's happening at work. What's the tone? What's the morale? How are people feeling? Again, creating that space that feels safe and that is also something that's cultivated, that's not a one off, but becomes a practice, is also a great way to build that resiliency. Now, the second piece is to initiate. And so when we think about initiation, I just want to make sure I'm on the right side here. Yep. Okay, so the second piece is to initiate. And when we think about initiating, this is important because so often we don't actually want to be the first one. So who's ever said, well, I don't want to call this person. They could call me. I'm always calling this person. Or I'm always I'm always offering to help my mom. Or I'm always offering to host the holiday dinner. Why don't they do it? And I know it's very tempting for us to be able to say that, and all of those feelings are very valid. They're very true. But what else can also be true? And if we're in this situation where we think globally, so many people right now are suffering, feeling loneliness, social isolation, or a combination of both, then when we initiate, it really invites that opportunity for connection. So if you could just decide to make this the inside job of going forward and doing this yourself, it will yield tremendous results. Now, I promised you earlier I was going to tell you a little bit of a story about running. I mentioned that I'm not a runner. Yet in 2020, living in the New York City area, as many people when the pandemic was on, wanted to connect with others and felt this pressing need, again, this human desire to be in connection and community with people. And so I started a run club. Again, I don't run, but I started a run club and we all kept social distance and we had masks and all of those things. And the very first run club, 7 people attended. Now it was 7 strangers, people I'd never met before. And for 2 miles, we ran or walked or jogged or whatever people wanted to do. We had a set start and end point that was exactly the same. And so we met for 2 miles. And we did that every single Sunday for 3 years until the run club grew to about 2,000 members. And people would bring their dogs, they'd bring their kids, their family members. When people would come out of town, they would bring their friend to join us at Run Club. And it was this amazing community. And I called it Slow AF Run Club because I'm slow. And I wanted people to know that if you were looking to run a marathon, I was not going to be the girl that could help you get there. But if you wanted to commune with people every Sunday for 2 miles, I was your person. And a funny thing happened when I initiated, when I created that run club. It wasn't just the growth that we had seen from 7 people to 2,000 people. What I learned was people's stories. And people would write to me and say, I joined this run club because I was going through a divorce and I was devastated. And I didn't have any friends. They took all of the friends in the divorce, and I was rebuilding my social connections. Someone else said, I moved here from the UK just a month before everything shut down, and I didn't get a chance to meet anybody. And because of the Run Club, I've met people now in the community, and I have friends. And one of the biggest success stories is there's this one gentleman who was here from Brazil and another woman who was here and from France, and they were both here to work and had never met each other before. They met at Run Club and they celebrated their 2nd anniversary this past August. And so simply by initiating on something that I didn't know anything about, again, I wasn't a runner. 2, I'd never organized a club. Truthfully, I was the person that doesn't even have birthday parties because I have this thought, no one will come. But simply by initiating, I was able to create connection and relationships that were built and flourished well beyond me. So the last piece of the framework, so we've talked about ask, the second piece is initiative, and the third piece of the AIM framework is to meet. And when I say this, this is about meeting people where they are. So I talked about you tapping into your own curiosity and exploration and becoming your own best friend, but also there's something about meeting others where they are. So when I recognized my friend in the community wasn't feeling like herself, I simply met her where she was. I didn't ask her, I didn't say, oh, well, just chin up and you'll be okay. I simply met her particularly where she was. And so, as you're recognizing in other people that they may be experiencing some of these symptoms that we've talked about, they might have a little bit less of a light in their eyes than they used to. Maybe you spend some time playing in their world where they want to explore and be curious. And that, again, is a way for you to build that deep connection, but it's also a way to lift somebody else up from where they are at the moment. So I like to think that we can do very simple things to meet people where they are, like volunteering. We can do things that work like skill sharing, right? There's all of this change that's happening in our workplace, whether it's AI coming in or different roles and restructuring happening. So how can we help exchange skills so that people can be up to date and feel prepared for what's going to happen next? So this is an opportunity, again, to think creatively at the different ways where you can help meet people where they are to create that change that we're aiming for. So to recap, we have our three-part framework, which is to ask, to initiate, and then to meet. So which of these, and I'd love for you to put it in the chat, which of these can you commit to implementing today? And it might be right after the call, which is even better, but what can you commit to implementing today? So if you could put that in the chat, and Jenna, if you're able to share, that would be fantastic. But what can you commit to implementing today?
We have a few meets coming in, ask and meet, initiate,
I love it.
ask.
Fantastic. And I will just share because I also continue to use this framework in my own life. I was sharing with Jenna prior to you joining and coming on today with us that I am going to take a quick vacation with my partner, and he and I are going to see some soccer. And he's a big UK Premier League fan, and we're going to go see a match. And called Arsenal is the name of the club, I believe. And so he is a huge Arsenal fan. And again, as you can see, I'm probably not the biggest soccer fan that there is or football fan when it comes to British football, but that is me meeting him at his interests. And so he will meet me at mine when we go shop the Christmas markets. But those things and these frameworks that I'm teaching can be implemented at all stages. So at work, in our personal relationships, with friends, in our community, it's something that really is timeless. So I invite everybody to think about what are the ways that you can commit to implementing one of those things today. Now, Oprah has been, particularly when my mother passed away, I used to watch the Oprah show. And so Oprah became almost this placeholder of an adult in my life. And her very last show, she said something that I would never forget. And so this is the quote here. She talked to nearly 30,000 people on the show, and all 30,000 people had one thing in common. They wanted validation. If I could reach through this television and sit on your sofa or sit on a stool in your kitchen right now, I would tell you that every single person you will ever meet shares that common desire. They want to know, do you see me? Do you hear me? Does what I say mean anything to you? So as we wrap this up today and we think about emotional resilience for yourself and for the community at large, I want you to think about these questions. Do you see me? Do you hear me? Does what I mean? Does what I say mean anything to you? And remember, in every interaction, at the core, people are looking for those human desires and they are asking these questions even when they are not explicitly stating it. So thank you so much. This is me with the Rough Club shirt that I had. This is where we would meet every Sunday. And so that is a QR code if you'd like to stay connected on any of the socials. If you have any questions or want to reach out, I would love to hear from you. If we do have time, I'd love to take any questions if there are any. And if not, I just want to say I'm deeply honored to share this topic with you today, to hold space with you, and especially around the holidays where I know this can be a tough time. I hope that these are some tools and strategies that you can implement for yourself, for your family, for your neighbors, and for your coworkers that make you just a little bit more deeply connected than you were before we joined. So thank you, everybody.
So much, Monica. I'll just give people a second to type any questions they have in the chat here. But that was really great. One thing that, this made me think of, Monica, is something that our team does during our team meetings. We always start out with peaks, pits, and props.
Mm.
And it's a great way to, share a highlight that happened that week, maybe something that, didn't go your way that week, and then also give someone on the team a prop as well. And I've just found that a really great way to get conversations going and feel a little bit more connected with those that you work with every day.
I love that. That's wonderful. We do something around our family table, which is the peak and the pit of the day.
Yeah,
Something very similar. Mhm.
yeah, great. We have one question here about overcoming shyness and related to loneliness, and if you have any advice for that.
Absolutely. So I will say we started off talking about the 144 times that we're on our phone. For shyness, what I would recommend actually are virtual communities. So in these virtual communities, it allows us to use those muscles that maybe we are typically not using because we are shy just a little bit more. And so this is a great opportunity for you to say, I'm just going to come in and participate in a way that feels comfortable for me. So I might introduce myself, and particularly if you find a group or community where your interests are really at the center, it makes it a little bit easier to participate. So I would say start there. And then as those things develop, if you're able to cultivate connection, especially if it's a virtual community that's somewhat local, when they do have events, you've probably already met maybe 2 or 3 people that you've talked to a little bit more frequently. And then that's a great time to say, hey, are you going to this in-person event? And now, instead of going into a room full of 25 strangers or 50 strangers, you have your 2 or 3 people that you already know. And that's a way to build that up. But again, I would say start small just by really being curious and asking those questions online to try to create that connection. And then you can build that into more of the in real life belly to belly space.
Great, thank you. We have a lot of comments coming through about people loving the sign in your background
Thank
and the
you.
name of your running group. We did have one question about maybe how can you communicate authentically with family about needing space for the holidays?
Okay, so if the person who wrote that, if you can give me a little bit more context, is it about maybe not wanting to join for a particular event at all, or is it wanting space while you're there? So a little bit of context would probably help, but I can give this as a general rule. So what I've noticed is that whenever, very simply, whenever we betray what we really want to do, for the service of other people, sometimes it has a tendency to backfire, right? So I don't know if you've ever been in these spaces where maybe you do go home for the holidays, but you really want to spend some more time away, or you don't want quite as much family time. And then that energy kind of comes with you, that feeling of, oh my gosh, I know this is going to be this conversation and that conversation. And it almost becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy that this event didn't go according to plan. So I would say if you have the possibility to maybe say, hey, I'm going to come by for X amount of time, and set that intention ahead of time, that could help. If you're traveling to a location and it is possible for you to maybe stay in a hotel or an Airbnb or another space, if economically that works for you and that's an option, that is something else that you can do as well. And the truth is, it's more important on the amount of time that you spend there, what the quality of that interaction is. And then truthfully, when other people are around, everyone's going to have their opinion, but ultimately you want to also feel as if you've had a holiday that you feel good about, and you feel like you are leaving with your cup filled and not depleted. And so I would say anything you can do up front to have the conversations about, I'm coming for this set amount of time, or I can't wait to see everybody. By the way, I just got an Airbnb because, and you can insert another reason, because I have some work to do and I want to, have some quiet space so I can knock it out. You can also do things like that. Maybe it's a little bit of a white lie in some of those ways, but I truly believe that it's also important to preserve your mental health, especially around times that may have typically felt a little bit more challenging to you.
Thanks, Monica. That's
Mm.
great advice and so relevant for the season that we are currently in. Um, So we are at time. So I am going to go ahead and wrap this up. But Monica, thank you so much for sharing your time and insights with us today. It was such an impactful and inspiring session.
Thank you.
And
Thank
to,
you.
oh,
I see the
yeah,
comments. I just want to thank everybody for all the beautiful comments. I wasn't able to see them before, so thank you.
so many good things in the chat. But to all who joined us for this session, thank you for being here. You can learn more about DreamBank's free upcoming programming at amfam.com/DreamBank and by connecting with us on our social channels. And if you're interested in revisiting this event or exploring past ones, our YouTube channel is the place to be. On behalf of the American Family Insurance Dream Bank, we look forward to hosting you again soon. Until then, keep dreaming fearlessly.